I attended a convention in Ipswich where Paul Darrow was on a panel with Nicola Bryant. There was a screening of the Doctor Who story Timelash. Timelash, broadcast in 1985 during the Sixth Doctor's tenure. The reason it refused to die is that Timelash is less interested in adventure than in accusation. Approached head-on, Timelash looked like a failure. Approached sideways, of course, it begins to resemble evidence. Carfell is socially built not on justice but on removal, not on rehabilitation, not persuasion, removal. Those who displease the regime are not merely punished, they are discarded into time itself, hurled into the timeless. The Doctor arrives not as a conquering hero, but as an irritant, a man who keeps asking why the system exists and who benefits from it. Authority here is ceremonial and brittle. History is treated as waste management. This is where the Wellesian frequency begins to hum. H.G. Wells does not appear in Timelash as a novelty or an affectionate wink, as John Nathan Turner might have intended, but we see him differently. He is absorbed into the history bloodstream. The Borad, Carfell's grotesque dictator, is obsessed with destiny, surveillance, and the absolute management of time. He believes himself inevitable. Wells presented younger than strictly chronologically would allow anyway. He becomes an observer, a recorder of his own raw material. I'm a writer, or try to be, is the uncertain insistence of Herbert as he is found in the Highlands of Scotland. Robert Holmes understood this instinctively. Holmes, whose name remains attached to the original concept of Timelash, had long treated Doctor Who as an argument with history rather than a tour of it. With the Doctor intending to take the TARDIS and Perry on holiday yet again, failure rises its ugly head. He finds himself randomly visiting Carfell along that aforementioned Contron tunnel, a place he has intervened with before in his third incarnation. Holmes' script was heavily written by Glenn McCoy, who comes actually under the credits, and is rewritten under pressure with little time. Holmes responds by questioning his name be removed from the finished episode, a rare and telling gesture. In later interviews, he was characteristically economical. It wasn't a script I wrote, he said. There was no rage, no indulgence, just withdrawal, in which, in Holmes' case, would self with a form of criticism. Eric Saywood, then script editor, later described the mid-80s as a period when Doctor Who was constantly having to justify its own existence. It is a story about a culture throwing its inconvenient elements into the void in order to appear orderly. A void that sucks in the TARDIS through a time tunnel in which the Doctor exists is beside the point. The Boraj regime reflects, it particularly reflects the 90s, 80s fear. The system's designed to manage and try and subdue risk. A fact that is instantly pointed out when he kills a rebel leader in one of the first opening sequence. Carfell is a surveillance state before the phase gained currency, as we see today. Citizens are monitored, and dissent is ritualized, and history itself is weaponized. When a following rebel is thrown down the Timelash, it sparks a sequence of events that will unveil until Vina, a chancer like her husband, who is actually still in Carfell, throws herself down the Timelash, taking the magical MacGuffin amulet thingy and the powers of the city with her. The Chancellors thought, obviously, that the Borad cannot establish power without it, and they were right. Though as previously mentioned, this intrusion into the time vortex, or Contron tunnel, sparks the Doctor's arrival and finds that Carfell is under imminent threat from his neighbouring planet and trade partner, which is inhabited by the Bandrels. Carful is also under harsh dictatorship, a fact that might be said to resound with other political situations today, with the president deliberately provoking expansion from all quarters. Trump is he's like a summation of the Borat himself, staging matters. Timelash looks threadbare, even by the standards of its era. Sets are sparse, lighting unforgiving, costumes theatrical, in ways that emphasize artificially rather than myth. Baker never penetrated otherwise. In interviews, he defended the story's ambition while conceding its certain limitations. The ideas were bigger than the resources available to show them, he said, a remark that might serve as a mission statement for much of 80s Doctor Who. He also noted that the Doctor's confrontational tone was deliberate, a man responding to bureaucratic cruelty with impatience rather than whimsy, taking all extremely seriously. When the Bake Doc is forced to negotiate the inside of the Timelash, he insists, while climbing down polystyrene walls, that the vortex attraction force is pulling me. Now, by the time Tekka takes charge, when Vina's father is overthrown and killed by the Borad, funnily enough, all this happens just before the Doctor arrives. It's rather curious that it drives the plot forward in unmistakable ways. It is an attempt to get the amulet back. Tekka integrates himself with the Doctor. Knowing him of old, he had been to the planet and revered in his third incarnation. When Perry is kidnapped, the Doctor is forced to get to the 12th century to recover the amulet, but is set off course by the offending time corridor or Condron Tunnel. The Cold-Doc arrives in the 19th century Scotland, where he picks up an overly enthusiastic H.G. Wells. The end of the episode concludes with Tekka threatening to throw the Cold-Doc, I'm going to call him that definitively from here on in, into the Timelash. "Goodbye, Doctor," Tekka sarcastically responds with a certain amount of relish as he throws him down the Timelash. Unpleasant journey. Starting with the resistance fighters saving the Doctor, they try to escape the sealed council chamber, an attempt which takes up half the episode. Of course, using gizmos and time refractor, the Doctor is able to demonstrate a unique expertise, giving Herbert a chance to gain pivotal material for his future novels, which at this point we're not given privy to, of course. As the young writer looks on in awe and admiration, we're treated to some sort of nostalgia baiting that JNT was politically famous for, with a picture of the third Doctor is found embedded in the walls of the council chamber when they escape. Yet, if the Timelash has a secret weapon, it is definitively Paul Darrow. Darrow's casting as Tekka, Carfel's scheming counsellor, is often treated as an afterthought, a curious bit of stunt casting from Blake 7. Nathan Turner was so keen on his stunt casting back in the day, so mega keen, it really was quite annoying at times, but in this case, in fact, it may be the story's most successful creative decision. Darrow arrives with a performance style already honed to the razor edge, theatrical, ironic, self-aware and deeply political. Where other actors play Doctor Who villains as monsters or functionaries, Darrow plays Tekka as a man who enjoys language, manipulation, and his proximity to power. Tekka is not the Borad, and Darrow knows it. He plays the role as a court survivor rather than the ruler, a man close enough to authority to benefit from it, but distant enough to escape the blame. His performance owes less to science fiction archetypes than to Shakespearean villainy. There is more than a trace of Richard III in Darrow's delivery, and he intended it to be so, I think. The conspiratorial asides, the relish in duplicity, the sense that the character is always half addressing an invisible audience. David Chandler's H.G. Wells is deliberately underplayed. This is not a grand prophet of future history, but a curious, unsettled observer. Chandler's listens more than he speaks. He watches authoritarianism with fascination and unease. He absorbs phrases, images, and possibilities. The suggestion is pointed. Wells's later warnings are not products of optimism, but proximity to horror. We see this today when we read his work. Authorship becomes the story's unspoken subject. Who owns the future? Who owns the future indeed? It is an undiscovered country, as might be said by Shakespeare and Star Trek. The boy believes it belongs to him, the future, that is to say. Carfield's council believes it can be regulated, much like our government today, who actually have we actually have our own Boraz sitting at the back of the stairs. Tekka believes it can be navigated. Wells begins to realize the imagining the future is itself a political act. The Koldak characteristically refuses ownership together. He interferes, exposes and leaves in the TARDIS closing sequence. Timelash briefly finds its most authentic voice. The Koldak and Herbert attempt to stop the missile. The comedy emerges not from gags, but from irritation, draining the moment of grandeur and reveling in Doctor Who's oldest joke, that power, when observed closely, is often ridiculous. Both actors understood the scene's humour lay in restraint. Colin Baker later said he played it as irritation under pressure rather than comedy, treating the Doctor as a man who is too busy to be charming. David Chandler recalled approaching Wells as a national Victorian surrounded by nonsense, deliberately underplaying wonder of bafflement. Now, knowing that Perry has been captured by Tekka and taken to the Borad, the Koldak speeds to the rescue, finding out from a confrontation with the Borad that he intends to make her a mutant Morlock. This in itself is rather convoluted and contrived, but nonetheless we go with it. So this is basically so that he can procreate, a rather dubious plot device in itself. Killing the Borad and so releasing Perry, the Koldak then files along to prevent an immediate attack from the Vandals, who are extremely pissed off. Tekka is dead by this point, again killed by the Borad, and such at the end where the Koldak tries to stop the missile by crashing into it. The TARDIS is a masterclass of character evolution, as he has an argument of splendid relish with Herbert. As Herbert tries to help the Koldak, he incites that they can stand together in the face of the enemy. Koldak is not amused, and it leads some engaging dialogue, swaying him to read out some of the coordinates from the console. The Koldak states, "If you wish to help while you're waiting to enter Valhalla, you can read off these numbers from the screen." "What screen?" he asks. "How many screens do you see immediately in front of you?" the Koldak irritatedly snaps. "Just the one?" "That's the one." The program owes Wells an enormous debt. Time machines, alien invasions, future histories, these are his tools. Having survived the collision with the Vandals' missile by dematerializing at the moment of impact, something the Doctor, not just the Koldak, but the Doctor actually does on a regular basis. We all as viewers know this was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen. The Koldak springs back into the council chamber with relish and arrogance. It's not until the Koldak picks up his calling card from the council chamber floor that we learn of Herbert's real identity, and the audience resounds with, oh, I see, yes, that's very clever." But, or rather, I think he'll return to 1885. The Koldak says of Herbert upon discovering who he is. He'll tell the world, knowing Herbert, quoting the time machine in the process. "The waves of time washes all clean." The answer offered is not comforting. The Borad falls, but the structure that enabled him remains alarmingly intact. Tekka adapts. Wells leaves unchanged. The Koldak refuses to let him stay and manage the aftermath. History continues without asking permission. This refusal of resolution may be why Timelash endures. It is unsatisfying in the way real history often is. Tyrants fall, administrators survive, systems adapt, stories are rewritten. It is not understood entirely after the story. Obviously, you haven't read the reading on the writing on the wall, the cold dog says, with unabashed enthusiasm and brashness, as the cold dog often did. The script is not to be taken as something which should be particularly admired, but the contents of the script and the underlying dynamics of its message should be revered. It should be enjoyed, and it should be seen as something which is relevant to today. Now, perhaps I have a glass-eyed view of this story. I think I probably do, given that it has some of my favourite characters and one of my favourite actors. But at the end of the day, we look back at Timelash with an admiring smile. Sometimes cynical, but always admiring.
The most luminous force in this part of the galaxy.
But do subscribe, give us a like, and give us a good... And primarily, at the end of the day, you really should, and I would very much appreciate it if you could just give us a good clicking.
Shakanaka.